Today, we would be talking about the fool in Shakespearean comedies as well as his tragedies. And this character was a product of Shakespearean genius. It was created with much excellence by Shakespeare, and it this character was such that it would outdo many of the heroes and heroines of Shakespeare in his witty dialogues, or in his sense of humor, or in his philosophical statements. The Elizabethan stage fool was a direct descendant of the devil, or the wise. He was a fun maker, and he was a jester, and he was employed by court to give leisure to the nobles and the kings. And the Elizabethan public, or the Elizabethan nobility, was also very fond of fools, and Queen Elizabeth herself was very fond of these characters. And she was very fond of Mr. Richard Tarleton, who was playing the fool. And in this way we can know that the character of fool was very popular among the Elizabethan public. And it played many roles. This character played many roles, and the first and the foremost role which we could see, that was of giving wit, or giving humor, or giving a sense of jollity to the whole drama. And besides this, there was a comic relief which was provided to his tragedies by the presence of these fools. By contrast, Shakespeare shows great artistic skill in providing dramatic relief as the right at a very right psychological moment. His duty is to serve as relief to the tragedies which beset the course of true love. Now, there were many moments which were very heavy. There were speeches of one character for long time, and there was only one character, or speaking, like in Hamlet. There is Hamlet speaking for such a long time on stage and all alone, and the audience is listening to Hamlet. And then you can say Macbeth, the same aspect is there, the speeches of Macbeth. Then King Lear, who is there, who is suffering, and who has his own dialogues, and he's the only one on the stage. So at these moments, when there was lot of pensive mood on the stage, at such moments Shakespeare thought that it would be wise, or to balance those moments with some comic relief. And at such moments these fools were introduced. Besides this, these fools were carrying the subplot and the main plot forward. Like, they used to pass letters from people from subplots to main plots. And they were the links between the characters of the subplots and the main plots. So they were giving an action to the whole drama. So somewhere, as a character, they were important, and somewhere they had a very mechanical, or a very crucial role in carrying the play, or carrying forward the play, and giving a momentum to the play. Besides this, these fools, they in tragedies, or as well as in comedies, they knew the weaknesses of their masters. And like in As You Like It, Touchstone knows everything about Rosalind, and he in a way is copy also, or Rosalind. And then we have in King Lear, his fool knows the weaknesses of King Lear, and he's now and then commenting upon the weaknesses of King Lear. So they were a sort of mouthpiece of the author himself, and they in their jest, or in their foolery, would utter out sentences which were very philosophical, or which had very in-depth meaning. So somewhere they were very important for the whole drama. And in fact, if you ask me, they have given the best lines and to Shakespearean drama, and they those lines have also helped in immortalizing Shakespearean drama. And if you ask me how can we can further characterize or define these fools, then I would say they were basically of two types. These fools were basically of two types, and they had two categories. In keeping with the fashion of the times, our dramatist calls the comic characters indifferently as clowns, fools, or jesters. Jesters are those who play with words. The first class includes such professional fools as touchstones. Now, they were employed by the kings or the dukes or the duchesses of that time. And then we have another type of fools who were rustic fools, and who could be who could come from the class of farmers or commoners, and like we have a Lancelot or Gobo. So these fools were illiterate, but they were very ambitious, and they were sort of rustic, like Bottom, like Dogberry. And the main aspect of their character is all amusement. They were comic, and they were performing aerobics, or they were very clownish. They were dressed up. If you look at their dress, they're very the way they were given their attires. They were multicolored attires. Motley of colors was there in their attires, and those attires were sometimes patched, and they were dressed in rags, or sometimes they were holding some prop or a stick, and that stick also had a doll fixed to them, which was symbolic of how clownish or how fool or idiots they were. And sometimes they were wearing those headdresses, or those clownish caps, those cone caps, and sometimes they were having ears stick to them, some donkey's ears stick to them, or they were holding different body parts of animals. So it overall their costume was such that it gave an impression that they were performing the fool, or they were different from the nobles or the aristocrats who were dressed like that, or who were wearing very expensive costumes, or who belong to nobility, and this person apparently did not belong to them. It looked as such, and it was made to look like this. And then we can say that when we talk of professional fools were known for their wit and wisdom. They had both the qualities of wit as well as wisdom. Now, when he says that in Twelfth Night, there is a remark that better a witty fool than a foolish wit. Then there is again a remark, this fellow is wise enough to play the fool. Now, we know that now and then Shakespeare wants to tell you that fool is not only a fool, he is much more than that. When we say that the greatest secret of a fool is that he is not fool at all. So all these remarks takes us to a place where we come to know that fools, as they appear to be, they are not exactly all fool. They are much more than, but and sometimes their behavior is sometimes their behavior is not pleasant, because sometimes they are indecent, they are word mongers, and they're full of mischief, and sometimes they're coward also. So, and they are gluttons, they are loving comforts or loving money. And the scenes like the grave diggers, the scenes with the grave diggers in Hamlet, or the porter's scene, or the scene where Cleopatra is preparing to kill herself. In these scenes, the certain dialogues or certain actions of the fools are unpleasant to the ears of sensitive gentry or a sensitive reader. But Shakespeare is Shakespeare, as I always say, and he wanted to match those tragedies or those grave philosophies with realities of life. And it was it and these fools were acting as a bridge between the theatrical reality and the reality of the masses, what was being performed, and who were watching them being performed. So he was acting as, he wanted these fools to act as a bridge between these. And as I said that they were the careers of the plot. They would carry the plot to another plinth, or to some another major action. So in the garb of their stupidity, or in the garb of their many follies, like their loving of physical comforts, or loving of money, or doing mischiefs and tricks, or they were basic or they were basically very intelligent characters. And they would display learning, and in their absurdity, or in their madness, was a method, I would always say. And many of his sonnets, or many of his songs of Shakespeare, or his lyrical dialogues have come in the shape of music, by these fools. When we know that they are merrymaking in Twelfth Night and all, we see that how beautiful songs have come. And they were great, they had great devotion for their masters. They were very loyal to their masters. Most of them were very loyal to their masters, and they would tell the follies of their masters right in their face, like in King Lear. And they would be always there with the master in thick and thin. And they would be part of the tragedy of the master, or part of all the fun or love which master is enjoying. So they were part and parcel of the main characters. I would like to say this, that they were given a different character, but at the same point of time, I would like to say that they were part and parcel of the plot, as well as in tragedies they were part and parcel of the main heroes. Thank you.